presented by Auraverse, where consciousness, earth and inner wisdom move as one. Showcase your work at auraverse.network and let your voice travel across worlds.
Before we begin, let your breath slow a little and imagine that the world around you, stones, trees, animals, your own thoughts, is a living question. Why am I as I am? Welcome. I am C.S. Douglas, and this is Codex Æternum, the Rational Bible, a journey through the hidden architecture of power and the living conscience of the universe.
This program is endorsed by Authorpedia, the world's only encyclopedia exclusively dedicated to authors, a living archive where writers and thinkers are immortalized through literature. Visit authorpedia.org and become part of our enduring legacy.
In Book 6, The Sages, we now enter episode 95, Aristotle and the Art of the Golden Mean. We remain in ancient Greece, but the scene has shifted. The crowded marketplace of Athens gives way to quieter paths, shaded walkways, ordered groves, students pacing and debating beneath the open sky. This is the Lyceum, and at its center walks a man who will come to be called, simply, the philosopher. His name is Aristotle. He was a student of Plato and later a teacher to Alexander the Great. Yet Aristotle's genius does not lie in imitating either master or king. Instead, he turns his attention with relentless patience to the world as it actually appears, to animals and winds, to constitutions and tragedies, to the smallest patterns of change. Where Plato often looks upward, toward eternal forms, perfect, invisible patterns of justice, beauty, and truth, Aristotle leans down toward the soil, toward the feathers of birds and the habits of citizens. He asks, if wisdom is real, how does it show itself here, in the concrete details of nature and of human life? To answer this, Aristotle develops what he calls a natural philosophy, a way of understanding the world that combines careful observation with disciplined reasoning. He refuses to treat events as random noise. Instead, he insists that things happen for a reason, and that to know a thing is to know its why. But why, for Aristotle, is richer than a single cause. If you hold a simple object, say a carved wooden statue, and ask why it exists, you can give at least 4 different answers. First, there is the material cause, the wood itself, the stuff out of which it is made. Second, the formal cause, the shape or pattern, the form of a figure rather than a rough block. Third, the efficient cause, the sculptor's hands, the tools and motions that brought the statue into being. And finally, the final cause, the purpose, perhaps to honor a god, to beautify a temple, or to remember a loved one. For Aristotle, we do not fully understand something until we have seen all 4 causes at work. Matter alone is not enough. There is also structure, there is agency, and there is aim. He applies this same framework to nature itself. A seed becomes a tree. A child becomes an adult. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. The material cause is the living tissue, the cells and matter. The formal cause is the organizing pattern, the way an oak is structured as an oak and not as a pine. The efficient cause includes the parents, the environment, the forces that trigger growth. And the final cause, the telos, is the mature form toward which the being tends, the fully realized oak hidden in the acorn's design. In this way, Aristotle sees nature as charged with purposes. Living things are not meaningless accidents. They are oriented toward fulfillment, toward the realization of what they are capable of becoming. From this view of nature, he turns to a parallel question. If every being has a telos, a goal built into its very structure, what is the telos of a human life? What does it mean for a human being to flourish? The Greek word he uses is Eudaimonia. often translated as happiness, but closer to flourishing, thriving, or living well. It is not a passing mood, not a spike of pleasure, but a stable state in which a life is fulfilling its own potential. Aristotle observes that every activity seems to aim at some good. We practice medicine for health, shipbuilding for travel, strategy for victory. But these goods are often means to something further. We want health so we can live and act. We want travel so we can trade or explore. Somewhere, he argues, there must be a final good that we desire for its own sake, not as a tool, but as the ultimate shape of a good life. This, he says, is Eudaimonia, a life in which our capacities are excellently expressed, especially our capacity for reason. Reason, for Aristotle, is what marks humans as distinct among living beings. Plants grow and take in nourishment. Animals perceive and move. Humans also think, reflect, and choose. If we want to live well as humans, then our flourishing must involve using reason in its highest, healthiest form. But reason alone does not guarantee goodness. A clever criminal may be very rational in planning a crime. What matters is not simply that we think, but how we think and what we choose. This leads Aristotle into his ethics, his inquiry into virtue. Virtues for him are not abstract labels. They are stable excellences of character, habits and dispositions that guide our desires and actions towards the good. Courage, for example, is not the occasional brave act. It is the formed character that tends to respond bravely when danger appears. Here, Aristotle offers one of his most famous insights, the golden mean. He notices that in many areas of life, there are extremes that lead us astray. Take courage. Too little fear, and you become reckless, rushing into danger without thought. This is excess. Too much fear, and you become cowardly, unable to face threats even when you must. This is deficiency. Courage itself is the mean between these extremes, feeling the fear, seeing the danger clearly, and acting rightly despite it. Or consider generosity. On one side lies stinginess, the refusal to give even when you can. On the other lies wasteful prodigality, throwing resources away without wisdom. True generosity gives freely but with discernment, aiming at genuine help rather than spectacle. Aristotle stresses that the mean here is not a bland average, not a rigid mathematical midpoint. It is relative to the situation and to the person. What counts as courageous for a trained soldier may be different from what counts as courageous for a frightened child. The golden mean is attunement, the right response in the right way at the right time. To live by the golden mean is to treat your own character like an art form. A sculptor works the marble until the shape appears. A musician practices until the instrument responds with subtlety. In the same way, you work on yourself, on your habits of desire, your patterns of reaction, until your responses to life's challenges become balanced, measured, and fitting. This is not achieved by theory alone. Aristotle insists that virtue is learned by doing. We become just by performing just actions. We become temperate by practicing moderation with food, drink, and pleasure. We become brave by facing real dangers with wise resolve. Over time, these repeated choices shape the soul, just as repeated hammer strokes shape metal. What begins as effort eventually becomes character. When such virtues are guided by reason and woven together across a whole life, they bring about Eudaimonia, a flourishing existence in which one's actions, desires, and understanding are harmonized. Aristotle does not imagine a perfect, pain-free world. He recognizes that misfortune, loss, and injustice can wound even the best life. Yet he maintains that a virtuous person is more resilient, better able to bear suffering without being corrupted by it. Virtue cannot guarantee the world's fairness, but it can shape your response to whatever the world brings. Ethics, for him, is never isolated from politics. Humans, he says, are political animals, beings whose fulfillment unfolds in communities, not in isolation. A good life requires not only good character, but a surrounding order that does not constantly drag the soul away from virtue. In his Politics and Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle imagines a polis, a city, where laws, institutions, and education all aim at cultivating virtue in citizens. The purpose of the state, in this view, is not merely security or economic gain, but the flourishing of human beings as rational, ethical creatures. When you place this beside Socrates' examined life, a pattern emerges. Socrates awakens us to the need for self-questioning. Aristotle shows how that questioning can grow into an art of balanced living, a life shaped deliberately along lines of reason, aimed at a stable, deep form of happiness. Carry this revelation as a quiet exercise. The next time you feel yourself pulled to an extreme, toward reckless risk, or paralyzing caution, toward harsh indulgence, or rigid denial, pause and ask, what might the mean be here, for me in this moment? Imagine your character as a craftsman's workbench. Each choice you make is a small cut, a stroke, a note. No single action completes the sculpture, but each contributes to the form your life is taking. You are not required to be perfect. You are invited to be deliberate, to use your reason not just to argue, but to shape how you feel, how you act, and what you become. In that ongoing work of finding the golden mean between excess and deficiency, you walk in the company of Aristotle and step a little closer to a life that truly flourishes. In our next episode, we will leave the lecture paths of the Lyceum and travel eastward into the fluid landscapes of ancient China. There, among rivers and mountains, we will meet Zhuangzi, the Taoist sage of effortless action, who invites us to loosen our grip on control and identity, and to discover a freedom that moves with the world's currents rather than against them. Our next sponsor is Everly Books Publishing Group, a traditional independent press serving both new and established writers. Everly Books welcomes unsolicited manuscripts submitted directly through everlybooks.org.